Hello everyone, my name is Jenny, and today I'm gonna present my analysis of the game Emily's Away. The topic of my presentation is nostalgia and agency in Emily's Away, how emotional attachment masks player powerlessness. So, introduction. What is Emily's Away? It is a narrative-driven interactive game set in the early 2000s that mimics the experience of using a chat platform like AOL Instant Messenger. The player will interact with a character named Emily by choosing dialogue options with the goal of building and maintaining an online relationship. And my argument is that the game uses nostalgia to emotionally engage players, but this nostalgia masks the fact that they have very limited agency in the game's narrative. Despite the illusion of choice, the player is powerless to alter the outcome of the relationship. So no matter what the player does, the outcome of the relationship will remain the same. And this is the first key term, nostalgia. It refers to an emotional longing for the past, often evoked through familiar aesthetics or sounds. And in Emily's Away, the aesthetic and interface evoke a strong sense of nostalgia, particularly for those who used early 2000s chat platforms like AIM, which refers to the AOL Instant Messenger. And how it connects to our reading? Well, in Before the Crash reading, Murphy explains how video game collectors turn early game-related objects into fetishized artifacts of lost eras. And this concept applies to Emily's Away, where the game uses the aesthetics of early 2000s to create emotional attachment. This nostalgia becomes fetishized, leading players to emotionally invest in the game's mechanics despite the limited real control they offer. So I'm gonna give a detailed example of this. In this example, we could see like the game uses sound effects, like the clinking sound, the iconic door opening, door closing sounds that mimic those of AIM, and also the typing sound when sending messages. The art is also pixelated, and you can see like those profile photos, they were actually closely related to the fashion and trends at that time. So the game surely brings the player back to the time of the early 2000s. A key term too is agency. Agency in games refers to the player's ability to influence the game's narrative or outcomes through their decisions and actions. And in Emily's Away, the players are given choices that seem significant, but in reality, their agency is extremely limited, and the game's narrative always converges on the same outcome, regardless of what player tries to do. So, the example is the character's backtracking while typing actually emphasizes this lack of control. And so the same outcome is that no matter what you do, you will eventually be more and more distant from Emily, and you cannot like change the outcome. So the ending always remains the same. And how it connects to the reading? Well, in the debugging game history reading, here's the quote, and it actually explains how interactivity sets game stories apart from traditional ones. And in Emily's Away, the player can choose responses which affects the conversation, but the game still controls the overall story. So this ensures that key emotions like loss and nostalgia remain central. It shows how Emily's Away balances player choices with the creator's control to keep the emotional storyline intact. So even if you have different choices that might seem to lead to different branches, the emotional remains the same. The emotion that it creates remains the same. So here's an example. So here, like Emily is talking to the protagonist about her boyfriend. So here the protagonist actually changes from saying like I wouldn't treat you like that to you shouldn't be treated like that. And it actually shows a shift in their approach. I think the first version is more personal and it suggests that the protagonist wants to position themselves as a potential romantic alternative, while the latter shows a more empathetic but detached response. And we could tell that the protagonist is actually trying to avoid making the conversation about their own feelings or intentions. It could indicate an acceptance of powerlessness in his ability to affect Emily's decisions. And it marks a moment of emotional restraint. And also shows that this also shows that how online relationships can feel both close and distant at the same time. Key term 3 is procedurality. It is the way in which rules and systems in game dictate outcomes, often limiting player freedom. In Am's the Way, the game's procedural structure ensures that no matter which dialogue choices the player makes, the relationship with Emily deteriorates. This mirrors the limitations of real-life digital communication, where certain outcomes, like relationships failing inevitable despite best efforts. And it connects to our procedurality reading. So procedurality is breaking complex interactions into small steps that lead to a specific outcome. And in Emily's Away, the game's narrative works the same way. Players make choices that seem meaningful, but those are just small parts of the predetermined story. While it feels like the players are shaping the relationship, the final outcome is always the same. The game's procedural structure ensures that the relationship will fail, and it shows how it limits true freedom in the narrative. So let me give you an example of that. So here, Emily is talking to the protagonist about like the music she likes. And here I'm just being really nice. I say like it's a great album. Oh, but I made a mistake that I chose the wrong song. So yeah, and I say like the business school is hard. Oh, yeah, it's hard. Okay, and then here, if I choose like, if Emily talks about Snow Patrol, which is her like favorite band, and if I say like, no, I don't think so. I'm just, oh, I don't know. I don't think I know it. I'm just not so friendly, not so nice. And Emily's response is actually different. And I choose it's so boring, and Emma's response is also different. So it just makes you feel that my choice will have an impact on the relationship. Like maybe if I choose something different, the ending will change. So it just gives you an illusion of choices, an illusion of agency that you could try different choices to reach a different ending, but actually you can't. But there are people that playing these games hundreds of times just to try different choices and see if they could make a change. So that's pretty interesting. And last but not least, I like to talk about the cultural significance of Emily's Away and its role in masking the player agency. So first, the game evokes nostalgia for the early 2000s internet culture. It recreates the aesthetics and audio of the early 2000s instant messaging platforms like AOL. instant messenger. This platform was central to online communication during that era. And for many players, this evokes strong personal memories of exploring relationships and friendships through text-based chats in their teenage years. So this can make the game emotionally relatable and deeply immersive. And then here's the masking process. By immersing players in a culturally significant digital environment, the game evokes a sense of comfort and belonging. And this nostalgia actually distracts players from noticing the game's rigid procedural structure. As the player become emotionally invested in the game, not just because of the narrative, but because they're re-experiencing a formative aspect of early internet culture. This emotional engagement makes the lack of real agency feel secondary to the sentimental journey. And I think the game also discusses the important topic of like the emotional disconnect of online relationships. So this is shown through in game. This is shown through how the characters interact over chat. Without being able to hear each other's voices or see facial expressions, it's easy to misunderstand what the other person really means or feels. And the game shows how hard it can be to connect deeply with someone when you're only communicating through text. For example, when the player sends messages to Emily, her replies can sometimes feel cold or distant, even if the player means to be caring or supportive. And this actually makes the relationship feel fragile because it's easy for Emily to log off or end the conversation, which it's tied to the game's title, Emily's Away, and it leaves the player without a sense of closure or understanding. I actually feel pretty relatable to this because in our real life, online communication often lacks the depth and emotional closeness that face-to-face conversations provide. So, because in text-based conversation, there's a lack of cues, so it's very hard to actually detect the other people's emotions. So and in today's world where many relationships happen online through social media or messenger apps, this emotional disconnect is even more noticeable. People can stay in touch constantly but still feel distant from each other because text doesn't always capture feelings well. And Emily's Away highlights this by showing how, like, despite being connected online, the characters still struggle to form a deep emotional bond, which is a challenge many people face in the digital age. I think that's why this game could emotionally engage players so well, because most of us have similar kinds of experiences. And we thought that maybe in a game, things could be different. Maybe we could have the ability to change the past. But actually, we can't, because we cannot change the ending of the game, no matter what choices we make. And the only thing we could do is moving forward. That's the pain of growth, and that's life. And that's what Emily's Away is trying to tell us. So that's my presentation. Thank you.